We are live. Here we go.
Hello, and welcome to the panel, Writers Helping Writers, a discussion of what I think is one of the most wonderful aspects of science fiction, fantasy, horror culture, and probably any writing group, but I obviously know about this one. And that is the paying forward, contributing, helping people who are coming up behind you and, getting help from people who were established before you. My name is Steve Gould. I'm a writer best known for the Jumper series of books, which were made into the movie the Jumper movie in 2008, and the television series Impulse on YouTube originals in 2000, well, 2 years ago, starting 2 years ago. So I was president of Science Fiction Writers of America from 2013 to 2015. And right now, I would like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Would you like to start, Christine?
Sure. Hi, I'm Christine Taylor Butler, and I am a former civil engineer, and I have been publishing in children's publishing for about 20 years. And a couple of years ago, I started working on my passion project, which is a middle grade YA action adventure science fiction called The Lost Tribe. So that's pretty much what I'm known for in this universe.
Okay. Eileen, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Eileen Gunn. I write short stories. I was connected with Clarion West for 22 years. I was on the board of directors, and I don't know, there isn't really any more than that you need to know about me. That's kind of it. Short stories, Clarion West.
Nebula Award winner?
Yeah, Nebula Award winner.
Dave, how about you?
Sure, I'm Dave Ring. Most recently writer and editor, most recently publisher of a small press called Neon Hemlock Press, based out of Washington, DC. And I'm coming up on 5 years of being the community chair of the Outright LGBTQ Literary Festival.
That's great. So I would like to ask whoever's willing to actually talk about their entry into writing or into fandom, either one, about what was their experience with people either welcoming in them or helping them to progress in the field. I'll be glad to go first, or I can
go first. Basically, I always read science fiction, and I'd always wanted to be a writer, and I'd always wanted to write science fiction, but I wasn't a fan. I didn't really know about fandom. I didn't know about conventions. I knew about conventions because I'd been to one once, but it didn't catch, didn't excite me. I'm, as most writers are, I'm kind of a lone wolf, in a large group of people. I tend to lurk off to the side and stuff. So conventions weren't working for me in that sense. And I had tried to write fiction for a while by myself as a little lone wolf, didn't know any other writers. And I joined a writing group in California, and someone in the group suggested I apply to Clarion, which was in Michigan at the time. And so I thought, well, I've been doing this for a couple of years anymore. I was a professional writer. I was an advertising writer in Boston, technical advertising, kind of like Apple's advertising. And so I applied to Clarion, and it transformed me. It transformed my life. It transformed my set of friends. It transformed how I looked at the fiction I was writing. But it didn't actually put me into science fiction. most of my co-students were not fans either. And, you know, but Jim Kelly was one of my co-students, and at one point we're both on the East Coast, and he said, let's go to the WorldCon. No, to BosCon. It was February. Let's go to BosCon. Joe Haldeman is the guest of honor, and he was one of our instructors. So we went, and we're both kind of sitting on the edges and, you know, afraid to talk to editors and stuff. And Joe and Gay come up, and all of a sudden we met everybody. And everybody we met, you know, like started introducing us to everybody else. We met Gardner, and this was before Gardner was an editor. He was just another writer, but Gardner was extraordinarily gregarious. And he took us, I think partly it's because we went to Clarion, there's a certain seriousness built into that. And I think it's harder if you don't have some ticket like that, a published story or something like that, to get taken seriously as a writer, but you will be taken seriously as a writer if you write and get published. Mm-hmm. So that basically was my first experience, and that particular convention, really, I went to the people that I met there, Gardner especially, said, no, come to the WorldCon, you've got to do that, you've got to do this, you've got to go to DC, you've got to go to, and so I started getting a list of conventions. At the conventions, I met lots and lots and lots of writers, and it totally transformed how I wrote and what I was doing and how I thought of myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm the same way. I left a job in engineering, and so I tried to treat writing like engineering. You get the writer's market, and then you look at all the publishers and you go, oh my God, so many places that you can sell your work, and you don't know what you don't know. And I went to a workshop and met an editor who kind of told me all the mistakes I'd been making that led up to the rejections I was getting. And so I started flying from Kansas City, Missouri to Houston, Texas, because there was a group down there. Everything is kind of word of mouth. And there was a group there that was a chapter of a national organization, but the people were kind, and they became kind of my friends and confidants. And because the airfare is always cheaper if you take the less popular flights. I would take a really weird flight down to Texas so I could keep the airfare at $99 round trip. And I don't like to be bored. So I would pitch in and hang banners and, you know, put up tables. And they said, would you like to come to the dinner with our guests tonight? And they sat me across from Kent Brown, whose family started Highlights for Children and has the Highlights Foundation writing classes. And we got to talking, and he said, why don't you send me something? And I said, no. And he said, well, why not? And I said, well, you know, I'm new at this. I don't think I've written anything worthy of sending to you. And about a year later, I got invited to go to one of the workshops they were putting on. And one of his friends said, he's really impressed because he goes to all these conferences and people are throwing things at him. And you were the only person who refused to send something. And it wasn't that you refused, it was the reason. And that person, I always tell people you have mentors you don't know about. That person started watching me from behind and all of a sudden was making connections for me. And he said, I think you're going someplace and my job is to help you, you know, even if it's to help introduce you to my competition. And so I learned very early on that writers' workshops and conventions, they don't advertise. It's pretty much word of mouth, and people in those communities know where to go. And I would show up and pitch in, just because for me it was about building relationships, not getting a manuscript sold. And that's how I went from 0 to 80, was people who helped me, and then I reciprocated by trying to pay those forward and backwards.
Dave.
I don't know if I have like a clean first contact story, so to speak. I fell into, I've always been a genre reader, and that's always been where my heart was. From like a writing community place, I was coming, I think, from like a mixed literary world, and also just like like queer networking writing spaces, which, you know, were happening sort of sideways or beside maybe some of the other spaces. So my first sense of like writing community was as a Lambda Literary Writing Fellow in 2013 with Melinda Lowe, who some folks might know publishes
Yes.
both, you know, genre and YA work. And those folks were like up and coming writers. Like I was in a group with and Samuel Delaney was one of the teachers as well. And I remember like I was trying to decide if I wanted to apply for his group or Melinda's, but Chip was leading the fiction group, and I was like, no, I write sci-fi. I need to be in the genre group, and I still kind of question that decision a little bit. But I got to sit next to him and stare at him and not know what to say. But those folks I grew alongside, and I don't know, like some of those have had really impressive kind of careers. And it's funny when you ate together at a weird cafeteria in California in 2013, you can still just email those people and it's not weird. So those kind of relationships have been really sustaining and connecting for me as I was figuring out where to go.
I think that's a very important point. It's not just the people who have come in ahead of you, but it's the people who are coming in with you, who help and you help, and who give you that sense of community. One of the things that the president of SFWA gets to do is select the SFWA Grandmaster Awards, and mine was Chip Delaney. So for me, it was one of those writing workshops at my local convention. I had submitted a story that was apparently about 600 words longer than their upper limit. So this was a story that was going to be read by their guest of honor who was coming. So the stories were going to be read by the guest of honor, and he was going to do a programming event where he read those stories. And his name was Theodore Sturgeon. So, but the story was too long. And so they hesitated about sending it to him, and then finally made a decision, well, okay, we'll go ahead and send it. We haven't got that much other stuff. But because they delayed, it did not get to him. So I get to the convention, I find out that he's not going to have read my story, but I go to the programming event anyway, and he does essentially the criticisms or reviews of the stuff he has received, which just takes him a few minutes because, well, like 30 minutes of a 2-hour program block. And he says, well, so we've got this this other story here that did not get to me in time. So since we've got a bunch of time, I'll tell you, I will read it out loud, and then we will do it. We will review it. And he did that for me. And that was his, gave a very small criticism and said, you should send this to Stan Schmidt at Analog. And I'm going to see him in 2 weeks, so I'll tell him. So you do that. And that was my first sale. So, yeah. So yes, very clearly from someone who is well established before me, but a very important point in my career. And there are many writers like that, Chad Oliver and Neil Barrett Jr., just some wonderful writers, as well as writers at my level who are coming in with me or just slightly above, were also very welcoming. What sort of things do you guys do now? Not just that sort of happen. I'm not saying that you actively go out, I must go out and pay forward today, but just sort of the sort of things that happen in your lives that sort of reflect the other side of that. The paying forward, yeah. You mentioned that you try and do that, but do you have any specific kind of things?
One of the things I said is I do other stuff on the side. I am actually a full-time writer now, but I do mentoring on the side, and there's a thing here called NECA Challenge, where companies come in with a real business problem, and then community volunteers who are business people mentor teams, teams of teachers, teams of kids, whatever, business people, on a real life solution to that challenge. And then we are judged, and I have this funny joke about the only time I've ever lost that challenge was when I bragged that I'd never lost a challenge. But they decided, wait, the mentors don't know each other. And so we had to say what we were doing. And I said, I'm an engineer, but I'm a full-time children's author. And another woman there said, oh, that means you can mentor me. And and I got this look of horror. And I remember doing that to an award-winning author once. I was so excited that he had been asked to be my kind of mentor guide at a conference. And then I blurted out, oh, after it's done, won't you be my mentor? And I could just see this look of horror. And he and I are really good friends, really good friends. And I said, he says, I can't read your stuff. And I said, I don't want you to read my stuff. I said, what I want is, hold on, I'm going to turn this off. I said, what I want is to ask a question of someone who does not have to read the answer in a how-to book. And so he and I have been friends for a while. But this woman said, when I said no, it just came right out. And she says, well, that was quite abrupt. And I said, what of my work have you read? Do you know anything I've read? What I've written, and the answer was no. And I said, no, what you want is the answer. And I can't do that for you. But if you've struggled with this enough, I'll pay attention in the same way that people who have helped me have paid attention. And I'll see what you're doing. And when I think you're at that point, I will call someone if need be, or I will step in and say, hey, do you want me to read a couple of pages? I said, well, it's, when you're a working writer, we get 100 emails from strangers every day saying, hey, I want to do what you did. So don't you want to mentor me? So I do that. I watch people.
I have a great idea. You write it and we'll split the money.
Yes. Is that like common? Is this like common? Or,
oh God, yes.
Or my second cousin's roommates, dog sitters, the dog groomer said you write and let me send you my 5 90,000 word books. And so what I've been doing is I'll tell you one thing that I thought was successful. I was asked to write for a celebrity for no royalties. And I said, no. And they said, you have to come up with the characters and the concept, and it might be a TV show, but it's going to be work for hire. And I said, no. But how about this? I'll do it for a small percentage of the royalties. But I had met this young author when I was going down to Houston, and she's amazing. I mean, she's just amazing. And I said, but I know someone who can do it. And my editor and I will coach her. And they got very nervous. It was Penguin Putnam. And I said, no, I'm pretty sure she can do this project. And she did. Every time we gave her editorial notes, it came back better. Celebrity, Penguin Putnam loved the project. So Celebrity did not. So she says, well, what am I going to do with all this work? I said, well, now you have something that you can sell under your own steam. Except that was back when diversity was not a thing. So agent can't get it sold, even with lots of people. So I knew someone who wrote a blog. I won't say for whom, but it is a well-read industry blog. And I said, this is the problem that people are having. And she says, I got you. So she writes a blog and says, now that Obama's in office, where are all these characters that are diverse? And the woman's agent, who could not sell this manuscript, took it back out and said, here it is. She put that blog right on top of the manuscript. 2 weeks later, it sold at auction for 6 figures. So, she didn't know for months how those connections got made. But a lot of times, we're dropping pearls in the right places to say, there's some talent out there we think you should look at, and they're stuck. But it's because we choose to do that. It works better when we know the person and we know the quality of work than it does when someone comes out of the blue and says, I want what you have. Can you recommend me? And I can't, because I don't know the work and I don't know if they would be able to execute. So that's
Sure.
an example of something I did.
Cool. Eileen, I know that you, besides being on the board of directors of Clarion West, didn't you teach at Clarion West multiple
I
times?
taught once, and I was scheduled to teach this year, so I will be teaching next year at Clarion West. But
Okay.
I didn't feel it was appropriate when I was on the board of directors that I should teach. It just
Okay.
seemed
Okay.
like gaming the system or something.
You have participated though in a lot of things like peer level workshops, like Sycamore Hill and that kind of thing. Haven't
Yeah,
you?
I've done a lot of
would
those,
you-
and what I'm doing right now that I think is useful for people who are trying to write, and also for people who are established writers who are getting both. I'm doing online workshops for Clarion West, which has made this huge switch into online workshops that are open to everybody. So you're not being vetted to get into them. You simply have to be there before the other 25 people, before the other 500 people that try to get into a 25-person slot. But what I've been teaching and what I think is it's my area where I can actually help people. I teach a workshop called Writing While Blocked, because you can't actually promise to anyone to cure their writer's block. I'm a blocked writer. I've always been a blocked writer. That's why I write short stories. You know, I can finish them at some point. Maybe 10 years and finish the short story. The novel attempts to lie in little clumps, you know, like clotted milk or something, and never get connected. But the Writing While Blocked workshop usually has, I kind of prefer like 15 people, but it sometimes has 24 just because they had so many applicants. And what I found is that the main benefit to people is, I mean, all the little advices and stuff like that are helpful, but the main benefit is being in a group with 15 to 24 other people who are all blocked in some way and are all trying to get out of it. And the students afterwards have come and said, I thought I was the only one. Come on, writers are famously blocked. I can give you a long list of famously blocked writers, but everybody thinks it's their block. You're the only one that's blocked in quite this way. And getting together in a group and talking about it with other people that are blocked instead of other people that are writing, 30 novels a week, turns out to be a very therapeutic thing for people. And they've been kind of joining up to write together because I found that co-writing with people during the pandemic has been extraordinarily helpful for my productivity. And it's made it clear to me that, yeah, I am a really slow writer. Even if I'm working all the time at it, I am just really slow. But a number of them have said that they've bonded with other people in the group and are helping one another to get past it or to work while you're blocked.
Excellent. Dave, do you have any examples?
Yeah,
I know as a publisher, you're clearly also nurturing writers to a certain extent, right?
Yeah, I'm brand new though, so I don't know that like that's the goal, but we'll let it be said if it's effective yet. So, but something Eileen said struck me as really true for myself and other folks that I know, and that the solitary nature of writing, often you don't have the same connections you might have sometimes in a different field, just peers, folks who understand your problems. So figuring out who else you can have those conversations with, when you find the people that you can have them with well and that sort of like navigate problems similar to you, it can feel like such a light bulb moment as far as getting through challenging moments or figuring them out. And as part of like organizing a festival, which has both like a local component and a countrywide component, you just start developing relationships with writers and thinking about where else they could, they should send their stuff to, or like, hey, this person is actually closer to them, and maybe they'd have a slot for them in their programming. But I remember like the fourth time I went to coffee with this writer who to be honest, I just thought of her as a friend. But like, she was like, it's really great to have a mentor like you. And I was like, man, I didn't know I was your mentor. I thought we were just talking about stuff, but it was because there were, things that just, I'd already, stubbed my toe on these issues before. So it was easy to talk about like, oh, this is how I got over that, or make sure you apply for this grant or things like that. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm your mentor.
Yeah. Well, or at least she was your Padawan. So,
Something.
I've been teaching at a workshop called Viable Paradise for the last 20 years on Martha's Vineyard. And one of the great things about that is it is a application workshop like Clarion's, both the Clarions. They have to have reached a certain level. And the really great thing about that is by picking the right people, we get credit for so much of their work. They're so much on the verge of going on. I mean, but one of those people I'm immensely proud of having, at least been present. I was a teacher, she was a student, is Nora Jemisin, who is an amazing, amazing writer. But it's more about picking them. But watching those classes, each year's class has this amazing bond. And again, they have come in not knowing any writers, in many cases, not knowing hardly anybody else who writes, who understands that when you're staring out the window and you've built this incredibly strong, structure of ideas, consequences, and so on in your head, but your partner wants to come up to you and talk to you about, did you do the dishes or the laundry, and they break the whole thing. They need to talk to people who understand that is actually writing. And so it's amazing seeing those clusters of community, sort of like a sedentary levels of community building up. And just as it comes up in the layer, there are also connections that go up and down from those layers. So it becomes definitely more of a matrix.
That's a very good
dimensions. Yeah.
That's a very good point that you made, because, pandemic has actually made writing harder. I sit here and think, wait, we went on lockdown in March. I should have completely renovated my house and had all my, my drafts finished. And I read something that said, we are grieving. We are grieving the loss of agency. It's one thing to be home writing because you want to be, versus you can't go out because there's something, dangerous on the outside of the door. And what I've noticed is all of my friends who knew what writing was for me, and they're working during the day. So, I have time to build up a head of steam. They're home. So they will call in the middle of the day, and I have had to turn the ringer off on the phone. But unfortunately, all my Mac equipment is tied together. So all of a sudden it's popping up on the iPad and popping. And I want to tell people, when I'm world building, I can't break that, because it is really hard to stop and then go back and do that. And so, sometimes I have to take everything that's electronic and leave it in the kitchen and go work in the basement. But writers get it. They don't call in the middle of the day. They might text and say, you got a minute. But writing is real work. And I don't think a lot of people get, other than other writers, that this is work. It's not this intuitive thing that, we're cooking dinner one day and we get this brilliant idea and we write Harry Potter, and then we go back to, turning off the stove.
This gets back to the person who walks up to you and says, I have this great idea, you write it and we'll split the money, who doesn't understand that the idea is not the hard part. The idea is, I mean, there may be some little special nuggets occasionally that are just brilliant, but it's implementing the idea. It's producing the structures. It's like, were you a civil engineer?
I was, yeah.
So doing the proper foundation work and the proper structural material to support that idea and so on. Yeah.
Can I say one more thing I wanted to add is, okay, so we talk about going out and finding community, find the right community. I'm probably going to hurt some feelings. I was so happy to have found a critique group when I was not published yet. And it was a group of women who met every single week. So I had this structure and there was conversation. And the biggest problem that you can have, and I know well-known authors who have had to fire their critique groups, is you have to make sure that your writing community is the right writing community for you. I had a book that my first editor says, I think your writing community is taking you off track. And so this book is is my very first book. And she says, it's edited and it's on the press. I want you to take it in as a raw manuscript and have them critique it. And I was torn apart in that meeting. And, oh, you don't want to embarrass yourself and you don't want to send this in and the boy's too young. This is an early reader that's 600 words. You don't want to embarrass yourself. And I just kind of looked at him with a blank stare and I said, I cashed the check already. It's on the press. It's going to be out in a couple of months. It's already illustrated. And there was silence. And I said, I think this isn't the right group for me. And so what I had to do was find a community that realized not all of their answers are the right answers. It takes a little searching. It's finding a writing community is like finding a mate. You're looking for people who can enhance you and support you, but that you're giving as much as you're taking.
Now, the wrong writing, peer level writing group can be as much worse than no writing group. Yeah.
Well, I think too, what you're describing is also a little bit like folks navigating gatekeeping, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the opposite of writers helping writers is gatekeeping.
Right. Well,
yeah.
One of the things, this was something we talked about before the chat went live, and that is that who you choose to mentor, to help, to read, to promote, to discuss with other people, can be exclusionary as it can be inclusive. It's hard sometimes, and I truly believe that in most cases it's actually completely unconscious. It's like unconscious bias. These are the people I hang out with, so these are the people I'm promoting, as opposed to trying to engage in some sort of process that at least exposes you to other writers, to people you don't necessarily associate with. That's one of the things I love about teaching at Viable Paradise is I have no, the people coming in are not people I've selected, not people I normally associate with. So it's the ability to be exposed to, people who are doing the work of all, from all sorts of walks of life. But is there anything, we have a question in the chat or sort of comment. In my experience when it comes to diversity and belonging to being helped, with each book, one chooses the fandom that will champion that book. I'm not sure if that's, I'm not sure what the question is there. She says, in addition, I write Christian, Black, feminist, sci-fi. So I think actually there was a comment about if you want people to reach down the ladder to help pull you up, or across, the stairs, helping you, you're both helping each other march up the stairs. It's very important probably not to just expect that to happen. That just as it behooves us to look wider for people to help, it doesn't hurt for those people who want help to actively seek possibilities. I think Eileen had a whole bunch of resources for that kind of thing.
I had a little list, but things have changed so radically in the last 6 months that there was a lot of stuff that didn't get into my top of the mind list. So my top of the mind list of what to do, where to go, if you want to make connections with other writers, is join CEFWA. Go to Clarion or Clarion West if you can, but that's not possible now anyway. And it's also a small group. It's a diverse group now. It wasn't particularly when I went, which was a million years ago, but I think it's much more diverse now. And I taught in 2015, and it was the most diverse group they'd ever had. We had people from Africa and India. We had people who are gender diverse all over the map. I was so proud of my class, you know, the class that I had spent 22 years hoping to encourage to come. And of course, with a class like that, it depends on people being able to write well enough to be in the workshop. It can't be widely, you can't just accept everybody. So it's essentially an exclusive group. But now with Clarion West, but also around the world, are plenty of writers groups that are not taking people on the basis of where they are in terms of their career or in terms of their skills. One thing that I wanted to say when other people were talking was one of the things I learned over time, and it took me a little while, was that you can actually like people and mentor people and help people without actually reading their work. You don't have to read everything in order to help people out. You don't have to even like what they're writing, as long as it, you know, it's congruent with somebody you think you should help, you know. And if you can give somebody a hand up or an introduction or stuff like that, it doesn't matter if you read their work or not. You can be, I don't know, it's kind of like being exogamous in reading. You can exogamous in your friendship, you know, befriend people widely and help them all out. Don't try to find the most deserving person to help. Just help everybody if you can. And I want to say too, in terms of places to go, Kat Rambo is doing some amazing stuff with workshops and with bringing people together in groups. I'm part of her every day. She does every 5 days a week, every weekday, she does a 2-hour writing session. Some days she does 2 of them, and they're fantastic. You just go there and you write. There's a little bit of chat and then you write. And then there's a little bit more chat and then you write.
We're talking about online things, right?
Yes, these are all online things. I mean, right now it's online time. It's not even productive to talk about going places and being with people because we can't do it, but we can all be online.
Yeah.
Okay, we're at 13 minutes, and I would like to encourage the audience, if they have any specific questions, to go ahead and ask them in over there in Discord. They will, you know, we'll be glad to do what we can. Or
I'm going to respond to the question about the fandom that'll bring you up. People become so focused on writing and making those writing connections with publishing at the end. I'm going to tell a slightly different story. I went to a writing conference and there was a woman there who doesn't do the kind of thing that I do, but she was interesting. And during the course of her keynote, she talked about being associated in film. And I had a kid who was stuck. And you're not allowed to, you know, solicit or do anything during the retreat. But after the retreat was over, I said, you know, I have this kid in LA, she's stuck and unable to find an internship. And the woman said, well, you know, call me after the conference is over. Just call me. Here's my home number. And we got to talking and figured out that my daughter knew her niece. They had both been overseas at the same time. And she says, oh, she's family. So she called the studio and said, you know, open up one more spot. You know, so my kid's a freshman in film school. That spot then opened doors for her. So now when I go to LA for the Nebulas, or I went for World Fantasy, you know, we talked earlier about the fact that there are cliques even within our own groups. And so here I am with this beautiful young Black woman, and who's coming up? Other people who don't look like us and going, oh, your daughter's in LA, you know, we have this round table, she should come. And so these networks are not just always making networks for you, they are making networks for people that you know, or they're giving you additional tools that when you run into somebody who's stuck, even if they're not related to you, you can say, wait a minute, I got someone I can call that might be able to help you out. So I hope people see that when you go to these conferences, you know, if you went to the Nebulas, they have writing every Sunday, you just log back on like you were at the Nebulas. and it's 2 hours of writing, that networking is not always about writing. It could be, hey, do you have a good plumber? It is about creating a relationship with people that goes beyond the writing and becomes more like friendship and family.
Those are excellent points. In fandom in particular, and this is actually not as much a positive thing as a salutary lesson about someone who was, I'm a writer who's coming up and I'm doing everything obnoxiously, right? And who ended up treating the people who were running the conventions like dirt, without realizing that the people who run these conventions may be the best friend of the publisher in chief of, and so they're just totally missing that these connections go all over. I mean, there's that thing about, you know how someone is by how they treat people they don't have to be nice to, right? And if you can't do that just normally, automatically, because that's who you are, you should at least try and do that, being nice to people just for your own sake. Sorry. But it's that network thing. It's those connections go all over the place. Yeah.
I saw someone blow up my mentor because of the way he was dressed. And then they said, who is that weird guy? I said, oh, his family controls all of Highlights Foundation and Highlights for Children. And they have 5 publishing companies, and you just guaranteed you're not ever going to do anything with them. So don't
or
judge.
you're going to have to undo a lot of stuff to do that. Yeah.
I guess one of the things too that has felt important from like a writers helping writers space has been like an organizing, like a festival. Like I'm in Washington D.C. and so thinking about like who's at the table and like who already has folks there advocating for them and who doesn't, and like how can you reach out a hand to see if they want to be part of it. And sometimes they don't, which is fine. Like some folks like prefer like intra-community kind of stuff for plenty of nuanced reasons. But being able to have said like, hey, I reached out to like this city's like X writing group and to see if they'd be interested in hosting a panel or like being part of the event. And plenty of those people have like taken me up on it and said, and maybe they've only come the 1 year and then determined it wasn't the right festival for them, but it was like a honest way of seeing if we were a culture fit for them.
And they absolutely could have achieved, even if they decided the workshop was not a fit for them. I mean, the festival, they may have still gotten a member out of the people who did listen to them.
Oh yeah, I mean they got folks in their audience, or they had people coming up to their table that had never heard of them before. So either way, there's like connections being built, and so I feel like that kind of like you don't have to be the best space for everybody, but like making like a solid effort to see like, hey, can we make this work is something that I found really effective.
Yeah. And I have to remind people, these conventions, they're all run by volunteers. People who are moderating are volunteers, and people who are organizing are volunteers, and they are paying to be at conventions that they probably don't get to see half of. I used to do Missouri Writers Guild here, and it's a year of your life. And I said, be appreciative, because a lot of people are not always appreciative. And when you are, it's remembered. This is hard work.
We have a question from Steve F., who says, when critiquing another writer's work, are you sometimes conflicted between offering an honest opinion versus toning it down or not addressing the major issues? Would you say that sometimes constructive criticism can be too much or overwhelming, or is this something that really depends on the level of trust you have built with that person?
I'd say it depends on the situation, and it depends on who's delivering the criticism. if you're in a group of people, say a dozen people, and everybody dumps on you, it's hard. One of the things that we have people do at Clarion West, and I think at Clarion too, is start off with a compliment. Okay,
Yes.
no matter whether you liked it or not, start off by saying something good about it. Even if all you can say is that it was neatly typed, you start off with some bit of praise.
It's true.
And then if somebody else has already dumped on in part of it, don't dump on that part again. Just, you can say, ditto what Bob said or something, but don't keep piling on. It's the pile on is pretty terrible. And,
Right.
and you have to take into consideration whether the person can actually use your advice when you're giving it. If they're a beginning writer and you're giving them advanced writer critique, they may not be able to make use of it. It may be just too much information, and it may be an info dump. So you need to tailor what you're doing to the level of the person you're critiquing. But yeah, it happens. It certainly happens. It can be totally overwhelming.
Sure. When I was a young workshopper, I would go out there to workshop to win. That is not a helpful thing. To say the most wittily cutting thing to say, and that was not helpful. Say something that is true, say something that is helpful or useful. Don't say things that, yeah. So we're at 5 minutes. Is there any last things that you guys would like to say about this subject or any other subject?
It's just a quick plug. Like if there's something.
I guess I have something to say, which is that mentoring.
So David just started, right? Can I get you right after Dave? Yeah.
All right, Eileen, my quick thing was just, if you see something you admire from afar, like a convention or a group or a volunteer program, try to fight that imposter syndrome and reach out and see if you can get involved. I think I'm echoing what other folks have said, but that really is the best way to have a reason to be there, to meet people, to get connected to something, is to volunteer.
Excellent. Sorry, Eileen, now?
I was just going to say that the term mentoring always just sets my teeth on edge a little bit because it's so hierarchical. And I don't want to be in either of those places in the hierarchy. I don't mind having people help me out. I don't mind helping people out, but I'm kind of against calling it mentoring simply because I'm not that hierarchical a person. So when I help somebody out, I'm just helping them out. I'm not necessarily mentoring them. I may help them out a lot or I may not. But I would say my advice is don't always look for a mentor if what you can just get is a piece of good advice.
Right. Mentoring's hard. I'm going to give a piece of different advice because I'm guilty of this. Writers can help other writers by writing reviews. We're all reading a lot. We're all trying, but a lot of times it's easy to forget. Go on Goodreads or Amazon or Barnes & Noble or something and write a review. And one of the things I discovered real quick is those books that come out where they have 100 reviews right away. It's because they had publicists and they have reviewers in their stacks. But a lot of people who are mid-list don't get that same. And we know people are reading the books because they're selling more than 5 books. So writers can help other writers by saying, you know what, I enjoyed this book. Let me go take 5 minutes and write a review on it. That will mean more to that writer than anything.
Okay, well, on those words, that's excellent. We're at 2 minutes, time to end. If I will pop into the Discord and answer questions for a little bit. We're encouraged to do that if you can. And thank you very much, Dave, Christine, Elaine. Thank you so much. And I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Steve.
Are we in odd or even on Discord?
It's Scioto even, I believe.
Okay.
I can't be on the Discord because I've got another panel and have to go.